OBSBOT have sent through their Tiny SE webcam through to me, which is capable of a blistering 100 frames per second at 1080p. Here are the tech specs for the people who like that kind of thing, but let's see what it can do and what you can expect from it. In a dark room with just a light coming from our monitor, and it's not too bad as we can be seen, so it would be pretty good for a very quick video call. Do expect a lot of grain in the background, but this is because there's no lights back there. But if you do decide to switch off your monitors completely, then do expect a massive decrease in quality and it's pretty much unusable. With natural light coming in through the window, and we are looking pretty crisp. There is some overexposure down the one side of my face where the light is coming in, but I kind of expected that. The movement is nice and fluent, and even the cat came down to come and check it out. You do need to be careful if you wave your hands in front of the camera, as this will enable tracking mode, but don't worry, you can actually disable this from happening if you want to. There is an HDR option on this, but you will need to drop that frame rate down to 60 frames per second to be able to enable it. Now, when I sit in front of a window with the HDR disabled, this doesn't perform too bad. The main problem you have is the light coming in through the window looks really washed out, but I suppose this doesn't really matter too much as long as you can be seen on a call or a stream. And now when I enabled HDR, I got the opposite problem. The outside looks great, but now I'm too dark and it's just not really usable. But this is not the end of the world though. If you do go to that OBSBOT Center software, you can have a play around with the compensation and improve things. You can go a step further and manually configure the exposure, play around with the shutter speed and the ISO settings and get a really good image. So again, manually configuring things will get you the best looking image. Using ring lights in front of me, and this brings further improvements to the image, and it even helps remove quite a bit of that background grain. It seems to take a few seconds for the autofocus to react when I move myself closer and further away from the lens. I did give it another test by putting my hand up to the lens and away, and this seemed to react much quicker. Again, the movement is looking fluent, but 100 frames per second it really should be. You may find that if your lights are switched on and you move away and come back to your chair, then you will be really overexposed, but the auto exposure will kick in and resolve this. It will take up to about 10 seconds for it to get the final clear image. Switching on some backlights behind us as well as still using the ring lights in the front, and the image quality looks great. It seems to have automatically adjusted the exposure as well as the contrast, as there's no glow down my face and the image just looks a touch darker. So I've not had to manually configure anything here, so I'm very happy with the result that we are getting. Focusing on a small object, and initially I thought this was really good, but then I did run into a few issues where it just would not pick that focus up, so I had to keep moving the object closer and further away from the lens so it could redetect it. Now this is where the OBSBOT Center software comes in useful, because by default the autofocus is set for your face. If we switch this over to global, then focusing on this small object worked a million times better. So if you are displaying things on a stream or a video call, then make sure you switch this option over. Focusing on an ID card using the global settings, and this worked perfectly. All the information can be read clearly, so if you need to display something like this on a call, you shouldn't have an issue. Removing a green screen in OBS, and this performed fine. You will see a lot of pixelation down the one side of me. That is my own dodgy lighting setup that is causing that. And just to prove this, I went and grabbed myself an additional light, pointed this towards the green screen, and it removed all that pixelation. So providing you've got good lighting, you shouldn't have an issue with this. Holding your hand up in the high five position will enable tracking. And to be fair, this does perform extremely well. I did try my best for it to lose the tracking, but I just couldn't do it. Not saying that it's impossible to do, because at my age I can only run so fast, and it did keep up with me very well, but if you are quicker than me, you may be able to lose that tracking. You do get multiple options when it comes to the tracking as well, so you can switch between an upper body track. We can do one that goes close up to your face. This one does zoom in, so do expect a little bit of loss in quality. You can have your head completely cut out of the shot, or you can have it just track the lower part of your body, so there are a few options here to play around with. You do also get an option to track your hands. Now I found this feature to be quite erratic, and I wouldn't really recommend it unless you are happy to manually configure things. Doing this does seem to help out a lot, and this did seem to work the majority of the time, but it's not a feature I could 100% confidently say that it will work all the time. Well, at least for me it didn't anyway. You can control the zoom by using your hands. The first option we have is where you set a point in the OBSBOT software, hold up your hand in the L shape, and it will zoom out from this point, and doing it again will zoom back into the point that you set. The other option you have is the dynamic hyperbolic zoom. This is where you do the L shape with both of your hands and you move them outwards and inwards, and this controls the zoom, and this zoom can be set wherever you want. The software also allows you to set 3 preset positions. That means that you can have one on your face and you can set the other 2 somewhere in the background. These can be updated too, so if you change your mind with one of the positions, you can change it to something completely different. You can actually go a step further with this as well, and you can manually configure things like the face focus, so if you want to focus on things behind you, you can change this to global. Now, one thing that I did encounter with this is that I boosted the saturation on something behind me, and when I went back to my face, the saturation didn't change. What you do need to do here is configure the saturation back on your face, and when you do toggle between the 2 different presets, everything should work fine now. If you have a messy environment behind you, then you can enable background blur. You do get full control of the intensity of the blur, but the higher you raise this slider, and do expect some weird things going on around the outside of you. Using the advanced option will give you a better result, but it is more GPU intensive, and I did notice a drop in frame rate when we were using the blur option. There is a beauty section too if you want to add some effects and make yourself look gorgeous. There's a number of sliders where you can fine tune how you look, and you can get some weird looking effects with this, even adding big bushy eyebrows and lipstick. You can add filters too, there are numerous ones available, and again you can control the intensity of these. This is a microphone test with the radio distance set at close. And this is what it sounds like when it is set to standard. And this is the audio quality when it is set to far. We're standing a distance away, and this is the kind of audio quality when it is set to close. And this is how it sounds when it is set to standard. And this is what it sounds like when you switch it to the far option. This is what your microphone is going to sound like with noise reduction switched off and a vacuum behind you. This is with the noise reduction set as weak. This is now using the medium setting, and this is using strong noise reduction. One thing I did notice in the OBSBOT software is that we can't select 1080p at 100 frames per second, but we are automatically set to 4K even though this webcam is not capable of it. So I'll switch this down to 1080, then back to 4K, and it does say that it is upscaling the image, but if you do want to get 100 frames per second, then you will need to use something like OBS to be able to achieve this. It can be mounted directly onto your monitor, but there is a 1/4-inch thread on the bottom, so you can put it on a tripod if you want. It comes with a USB-C to USB-A converter, so you're covered for either connection when you're installing it onto your computer. There's no privacy cover on this, but it doesn't need one, because when you finish using this, it will automatically point the head downwards so that it is no longer looking at you, and you can select how long the delay is before it does this.